Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Curators for the Kennedy Curious. We have a lot of important stuff to discuss this evening, and so we're going to get right to it. This election is, for many of us, a 1776 moment. It's nothing less. And tonight's discussion will demonstrate why. We're here to talk about our food, our water, our health, all of which are under direct assault right here in America. I kid you not. Everyone needs to hear this because these issues are gravely affecting all of us and especially our children. We always thought that the enemy was from some foreign land, some fanatical religious group, or something along those lines. But what we're finding is that the real enemy is right here in corporate America, where there is an incestuous relationship between the profiteers who are going to great lengths to protect their interests at the expense of the American people, and using government officials and agencies in the middle to protect their interests rather than protecting the American people from their corrupt practices. And we're going to delve into this. This has been going on for a long time, over a period of decades, but it's been getting worse and worse. And now what we're seeing, and we'll show some info on this in a bit, we're seeing how people's lives are being directly affected. It wasn't enough that they came for our wallets, where 57% of Americans cannot even put their hands on $1,000 in an emergency, right? Where the middle class is being hollowed out. Now they're coming for our health and for years of our lives, all in the interest of protecting their profit and their profit growth. This is no joke. All of us here in this podcast know that Bobby Kennedy is the man, the one who will bring solutions to this crisis. And it is a healthcare crisis in America. So those sound like strong words, but you will learn that this is really worth everything I'm saying, and we'll get into it here. So, Jonny, tell us what your experience is here, what you've learned. Give us the 2-minute recap.
I aspire to be the best advocate I can for safe food. And I've kind of been on that track for 5, 6, 7 years. I came to a point where I realized, this is the most noble thing. This is what's most important, is our health. And I realized that here in this country, in America, we are being taken out by the toxicity in our food and water. And to my mind, the main culprit is Monsanto's glyphosate with the trade name Roundup. It's in 95% of our food. And we know the pathologies of why this is bad. We could get into that. But the correlation with all of these diseases increasing is like 98, 99%. And what drew me to Mr. Kennedy was that he was there in the courtroom that day when the first lawsuit concerning this chemical versus Monsanto. And so, yeah, his whole storied career is amazing. Like you mentioned, the river keepers, fighting the factory farms, so much amazing work he's done. But yeah, that's kind of why I have become so passionate about him, is that I kind of knew about him from that. And I think this issue is so important. And when he stepped up for this moment to announce his candidacy, I've been following him very closely. And as I go down the rabbit hole, I'm just amazed at the consistency of this man. He's just right as rain on all these issues, and he's speaking to all of them. And that's so courageous, because he's speaking against these powerful industry interests you mentioned that are running everything. And what's more, who many of us believe, have been the ones that took, his uncle and his father from us. So yeah, I'm just really taken with this moment, the challenges we face in our country, and the opportunity we have to have a true public servant step up and for service. I really am taken by what this man is doing.
Yeah, that's awesome, Jonny, and I'll get back to that in a couple of minutes here. I want to hear from Aaron, because I know you've spoken about some of these issues, Aaron, in particular. Yeah. I think you have some insight on Tyson and maybe a couple of others.
Well, I think I read a really good article today. Jeffrey Tucker is one of my favorite authors. He writes for Brownstone Institute, which was really awesome in COVID. They did a great job all the way through COVID, talking about the different things that were going on. But one of the things he brought up today, and they're more sort of libertarian in their thoughts, and he was talking about the internet today and sort of different things that have gone on since the 90s, which when, the internet started, there was a sort of Wild West attitude about it. And it now is kind of this total corporatist world. And the best line out of his article today was called consumer sovereignty. And that's something that we don't have, in a real true free market. You have the consumer and the seller, or the product manufacturer. The old adage is the customer is always right. But in this case, these corporations are so large, and sometimes it's even the government that's doing the buying. So they become the customer, and so your sovereignty as a consumer is eliminated. And so I think it's really important as we have this discussion in relationship to food and toxicity and all of it. Our sovereignty as consumers is we really are at the mercy of who's regulating it and who's being the watchdog over the whole thing. There's so many stories from today, whether it's the Supreme Court having their discussion about free speech and having conversations about who's watching the hen house. Well, if the fox is the person that's supposed to be the guard of the hen house, lots of things are going to happen. And I think that is really the case in relationship to food and toxicity and all of the stuff that are happening to us on the ground level. You think about Tyson. Mr. Kennedy's been suing Tyson for 30 years because they just don't. They're not a great corporation. I mean, they don't do great things. Their food it's a cheap way to produce things. They're talking about chicken blobs and turkey blobs that are all just mass produced stuff that are all in cages and it's just a real cruelty side of things and not very good food. And then today, Tyson, or a couple of days ago, announces that they're going to lay off an entire city of workers, and they're going to get visa workers that are migrant workers. And so in order to keep the food costs even lower, raise higher profits, it's not about necessarily making the chicken cheaper for us. It's about trying to maximize those profits as a corporation because they're stock held deals. And so Tyson wants to raise their stock price. So all of that's going in. The financial side of it, as I've said many times, you can't get away from those kinds of things. And Tyson's done it. Smithfield Ham has done it. There's all sorts of people in this industry that are not just about putting poison in the water, but actually, or poison in the air or into our food itself, or making poison food for us. It's really this kind of strange deal where we've lost our sovereignty as consumers. We have no say. We have no ability to say, hey, you're treating us incorrectly. You're abusing us. There's no consequence for it because they're so large and they're so overwhelmingly dominated by stock prices and Wall Street and all the rest of it. It's a very strange world to be in. The customer isn't always right in this case.
And the no consequences piece, Aaron, that's where the political problem comes in my mind, because there should be consequences.
Sure,
and,
certainly.
These companies like Smithfield and Tyson and Monsanto, they sell themselves to, they undercut the average farmer, the average, what happened in North Carolina with Smithfield. Anyone can read up on it. They put all of these mom and pops out of work. They undercut using god-awful methods. They sell themselves to a large Chinese company. Good luck trying to go after them and the liability. Good luck trying to go after Monsanto when they're owned by Bayer. They purposely sell themselves to foreign companies to shield their future liability. That certainly is the logical connection there.
And the sort of always the argument from my side of the perspective is that the legal system is what should be the check in your ability to address those concerns. Maybe that's slower, maybe that's not efficient, but that's really where these things belong. If somebody does harm, there should be justice, due process under the law in order to administer justice to somebody that's done harm. how do you do that when you're a single person, or even a class action lawsuit, when somebody can just settle for $1 billion and it doesn't have any impact to their bottom line? It's really, we're in a complicated time, and that sovereignty is lost.
It is. And that's why it is a 1776 moment for us, because the public interest has been plundered. It's been pillaged. And perhaps we're still living off that sugar high of all that debt and borrowing and money printing that has occurred over decades. And we still feel this, we still derive this sense of comfort from having a kitchen granite countertop, or, that extra car in the driveway. But the reality is, all of this profiteering that's been occurring has been on the backs of our future, our children's future, right?
Yeah.
And as I said, we're not just paying with our wallets, we're paying with our health and with years of our lives now. And they will not stop unless and until the people make it stop.
Yep.
And this is why our voice needs to be resounding, because we have to make it impossible for them to continue this practice, because they're making it clear right out in front of us in plain daylight. This is how we operate. This is what we're going to do. It's always a financial decision. Unlike the old days back in the 50s, when there was a sense of community, there was, anyone wants to read up on the kind of man that Conrad Hilton was, the Hilton Hotels developer, a man of the people. These were the heroes, the corporate executives, back when they were only making 30 times what the average worker was making, right? Not 400 times like today, right?
Yeah.
And as they're making that 400 times the average worker, and these executives get incentivized with stock options and all kinds of perks, and they become that billionaire class. Again, this is directly at the expense of the 99%. So, yeah.
Yeah, and it's not a class warfare conversation. It's not a resentment situation. I'm not resentful of the billionaire. I'm resentful that they use and manipulate the situation and the system in order to abuse the 99%. It's not a resentment that somebody's successful. That's not at all what this is. But if you do it on the backs of somebody else, those of us that live actual life on the ground, if you're doing it on our backs, at our expense, at the cost of our health, there's got to be a consequence for that. You are offsetting your costs as a true free market person. You're offsetting your costs to me, and that's not right.
That is correct. And that's why when we say that, the average CEO's salary used to be 30 times that of the average worker in that company, it was the proper reward for their hard work, their risk-taking, their talent, their education, their dedication, all of the things that that they brought to the table to grow a company. They absolutely deserve that reward. The issue becomes one of perspective and proportion. And when we add this element, and this is where I know you've talked about Wall Street as being a factor here, and the financialization aspect that that has basically turned that 30 times the average worker's salary into 300, 400 or more times the average worker. That's a system that's gone off the rails.
Yeah.
And with that increase comes a commensurate liability. And this is the part that most people don't get. They want to look at that corporate executive and say, hey, that's a real success story. Let's put him on CNBC, right? But what they fail to realize is that huge amount of wealth that's being transferred to that person is mostly, not entirely, but mostly a zero-sum game. It's coming from someone. It's coming from that person who's being forced to eat pink slime from a fast food restaurant.
Yep.
And that's an actual term, right? This is the connection that I'm praying that people begin to make and recognize it as a political problem with a political solution. The only political solution I know is Robert F. Kennedy Jr., because he's been fighting this fight for decades. He's the one. It's amazing to me that given the situation that we're faced with in this country, that we actually have a hero in our midst, a David ready to fight Goliath right in front of us.
Yeah.
But these corporate interests are so entrenched and so fearful of losing the power that they've gained that they then try to turn the tables and smear him. And we can talk about that too. But I'd love to hear from Jacqueline. There's a lot here, Jacqueline. What would you like to talk about first?
I talked a lot. Sorry, Jacqueline.
Me too.
No, I love it. So actually, to take it even further than that, we have to not just become aware. We need to become proactive, because they're always proactive. They're always looking past the horizon of where the next place that they can profit and exploit for their own gain. And it's that constant gluttony that is just shoveling like the next move. And I bring this up because as we are becoming more aware about our health, issues, and starting to go eating organic and non-GMO, and they're already ahead of that game. They've created these agencies, who give you the seal of approval for organic and for non-GMO, and then all these other hoops and seals that they have. Who owns those seals? Who regulates those seals? Those are things that we have to really look into. And now on top of it, it costs a lot of money to the farmer. It costs a lot of money to the small producers, and they can't compete. So they get swallowed up. So they're caught in where they're farmers and food producers and product producers, where they're sitting there, where they are doing the right thing. They're making the right product, but they can't go to the next level to get one of these seals of God knows who is controlling, and what are those parameters, where are they cutting corners in that too. So they're already there. They're already in that mix, and it's that's frightening. So we have to get full charge, not just aware. We got to run ahead of them. But I do believe that the messaging is the biggest thing. Speaking about it as loud as we can. And, Kennedy, he's been doing it for a long time. He's been sounding this alarm for a very long time. And now we just have to put our voices behind him so everybody can hear. We heard him loud and clear. But
Yes.
You know what? We just need to help others see it. And I think that they'll feel the same way that we do too. They'll feel that sense of urgency and that need.
And this chart, Jacqueline, shows why we're not just making noise here for no reason. We're highlighting the fact that yes, we are dying sooner, and this is not about COVID. You can see the bounce back in other industrialized countries. The reality is something is killing us. Something is making us sick. And this is, by the way, from the Kaiser Foundation and written up in The Economist, just for those who want to know the source of this information. We showed this at last week's episode, but it was a different chart. Similar, but different. This is life expectancy at birth. We're dropping. And so, to me, this is an indication that that the healthcare system, the food system, what we're doing is really hurting us. The ingredients, Jonny, in our foods are much stricter in other countries. Companies here like Kellogg and General Mills are allowed to get away with significantly more toxic ingredients when distributing their products to U.S. citizens versus other countries. You know about this. Can you talk a little bit about that?
It's unbelievable. Our food, American food, is banned in dozens and dozens of countries.
Food.
For one, we have this glyphosate we were talking about, and like you said, it's just a ton of toxic soup of so many chemicals. There's
Jonny, question: how much glyphosate does the average person take in?
I'm not sure about that exact number, but a little bit is very bad for you. It's like it's an antibiotic and a carcinogen. But I know in America we use 3 pounds per person growing our food, and that is a lot, guys. That is a lot. They use less than a tenth of that over in Europe. And we have so many reports of people going over there and being able to eat bread and eat like a king, when over here, they can't do that, and losing weight. And go to Europe and they lose weight. And yeah, you talk about the ingredients in the food, side by side comparisons. We see that the exact same brand names, whether it's Frosted Flakes or Doritos or Mountain Dew, even, the American version has 7 to 12 ingredients, while the European version has, 5 to 7. And where we use red number 30 and yellow number 5, which are known carcinogens, they're using turmeric and they're using paprika. And yeah, it's just incredible, the difference. We are the sickest country on earth, and it's for a good reason. We're letting them have a race to the bottom in our goods and services, and we have just completely sold out our people. And you talk about our health, but I say it's our lives and liberties. It's everything. They are taking our freedoms aside from that. Aaron talked about the sovereignty, consumer sovereignty. I love that. We don't even have the choice and the freedom to choose safe food for our children.
No.
And and for some of us that can, because in a lot of places you cannot find organic food. I was helping with a farm nearby, and there's one grocery store and not a single thing in there is organic. So some people will say, oh, well, people have choices. No, a lot of places they don't. And all food should be safe, guys. There should be nobody saying that, oh, well, if you made a little more money, then your food could be safe and you wouldn't be poisoning your children and your parents and your loved ones. No, all food should be safe to eat. None of it should have poisons in it that we know are toxic. It's like every poison is assumed innocent until proven guilty. So they'll just change the ingredient, the molecule formulation just by tweaking it a little bit, and they can just keep poisoning us. And that's what Monsanto did recently with these PCBs. It's just and then you talk about those. Well, that's not an ingredient that they use in farming. Yeah, but it gets in all of our food from the packaging. So if you're eating fast food, you're eating forever chemicals that cannot detox through your blood naturally, and they just go round and round in our bodies, and our bodies cannot break them down, and nobody's talking about it.
And the toxicity builds. You saw that obesity chart, right? The United States is right at the top of the obesity crisis in this world. 80% of adults in this country are overweight or obese. It's a very scary trend, and we have children, having all kinds of problems too. We have pharmaceutical companies now that want to take any overweight child and inject them at the age of 12 with Ozempic once a week for the rest of their lives. That's their solution. And I was listening to a podcast between Bobby Kennedy and Callie Means, who I'm praying after Bobby gets in the White House will become Bobby's FDA commissioner or something akin to that, because Callie Means absolutely hits the nail on the head on every count here. He knows what's wrong. He knows how to fix it. And I implore anyone and everyone, go listen to Callie, Calley. His last name is Means. And he is a home run listen on that podcast. And he tells us there are 1,600 chemicals in our food in the United States that are banned in Europe and Japan. We have 33% of our young people, 33%, 1/3 either have diabetes or prediabetes. 25% of adults are on SSRIs. 40% of men are on a statin. 25% of us have fatty liver. Where the hell did that come from? Right? These are existential risks being thrown at us right in our faces. How are we going to respond? the bigger crime than the perpetrators of all of this would be for the people to just sit back and let it happen, right? That would be almost worse than, what these profiteers are doing to us and turning us into lab rats. I'm not going to stand for it. I will not let my children become lab rats to the degree I can help it. That's why we need what the candidate Bobby calls a peaceful revolution, and he talks about this. This is the culmination of a multi-decade financialization process. This is how I see it, guys. Of a financialization process where stock prices keep remaining high, right? But our health, the average person's financial situation is going in this direction. It's all part of this big giant collusion between these corporations and Wall Street and the Fed and the politicians, right?
No other thing I know of can actually decide that the best thing for their bottom line is to kill their customer. But that's what we have between food, pharmaceuticals, big ag, this amalgamation of all these things. No one else gets to do this, but for whatever reason, because it's most profitable to have dying people and sick people and fat people. And it's crazy. I mean, this is anecdotal, but my cousin and their family traveled to Italy. She's wildly allergic to almost everything in the United States. Goes to Italy, eats everything, feels better for their 2-week time that they're there than she's ever felt in her life. And they have a contemplation of moving because it's so impossible to live here and eat good food. And they're very conscientious about the whole thing. But it's everywhere. It's in everything that you touch. It's in every food you pick up at the store. You can have whatever label you want on it, organic, non-GMO, gold standard, everything, and it still has all this stuff in it. There's all sorts of stories of people who are Montana farmers that grow organic to ship their wheat to Italy or over to Europe, and it's rejected because it tests positive for glyphosate because it's everywhere. It's in the water, it's in the air.
Is that runoff? Is that from the water? It's unintended,
but how do you know? How could you control a pesticide that they're spraying from airplanes? Right. To whose field it goes into. I mean, there's so many things about this that are just criminal. It's a criminal enterprise. But there's the saddest part of it is that if the answer is small government and to try to figure out how to do this, which would be my inclination as a person, you'd go, well, yeah, criminal enterprise typically has some consequence legally on the other side of it that is equitable under the law. That's not what we live in. So we have to find somebody that can bring back consumer sovereignty.
I think you're saying that the mob would be an improvement.
Yeah, absolutely it would. They only kill some of their customers, not all of them.
Right. And you have to kind of break a code first. So who's the top funder of media in this country? You guys probably know, right? Big
has pharma. To be pharmaceuticals. Yeah.
There you go. Who's the top funder of politicians?
Got to be pharma. Similar. Yep.
Who's the top funder of medical schools, of research labs, of civil rights groups? All big pharma. This is something else that Callie Means talks about, And this is so this has been going on. It's like they take the most basic human element of health, right? And they've figured out a way to commoditize it and not, like you said, not treat the patient first. And that, we talked about this last time, patients being commoditized. We want, it's a model of sickness, not a model of wellness. The more sick the population is, the more they profit. And that's when we end up with these, 12-year-olds getting weekly injections of a drug that they should be going on a diet for instead, right? Or learning to exercise better. So this is some scary stuff. Now, Bobby Kennedy says in his first 2 weeks he's going to declare a state of emergency over the health of our nation. First 2 weeks in office. Upton Sinclair said, it is difficult to get a man to understand something when his salary depends on his not understanding it.
It's a great line.
And I think that is kind of what this sort of cognitive dissonance that we've experienced among the masses who just refuse to look at the truth. They don't want to know. And because they're on a different team, they choose not to recognize this genuine hero in our midst in Bobby Kennedy, right? Even if you disagree with him on certain things, like, we could all find things we disagree with everyone on, right? But the character of the man, the principles that he brings to the table, the work ethic, the expertise, the encyclopedic knowledge, the solution mindset. These are so unique in politics. They don't know what to do with this man, right?
No.
So,
Jonny, you know about the rain stuff. I was kind of speaking off the cuff, but tell me about that glyphosate stuff in the rain. I mean, how does it get there? I mean, it's got to be just absorbed through the water system.
Well, I'm a huge fan of Dr. Zach Bush. He talks about, how this glyphosate is causing all of these issues. And he talks about how, we're finding it in the rain, and this stuff, like you said, it's an antibiotic, which is no good for our microbiome. And, I've also heard there's a meteorological effect where it kind of accrues at the poles. So the Inuit are getting a lot of it in their snow. It's getting into seal blubber. They're getting all sorts of cancers from it affecting them this way. So it's insidious. It's getting everywhere. Everywhere. The most removed people in the world are getting it in their rain. But, I wanted to talk.
Guys, I just want to throw this up there. Brenda sent me this, our producer, and it shows the ingredients,
list of ingredients.
Quaker Oats in the U.S. versus the U.K. Pretty simple stuff in the U.K. But when you look at and this is not necessarily anything new, but I think it has been getting worse and worse over time. And there are many other examples like this. This is Quaker Oats. There's also, I'll show you another one here. This is Fruit Loops, which you couldn't
tell from the list of ingredients on the Fruit Loops as much, but if you zoom in, it's like we were talking about.
Yes, exactly, which I'm about to do. There we go. Okay, so Fruit Loops in America versus Canada. There we go.
So you see these, we got these red dyes on the left, all these different dyes, yellow number 5, red number 30, all of them, they're all associated with different types of cancers.
I was going to say that in the FDA, differences between the FDA and the other agencies that are, say, in Europe, is that they found a loophole in there that they call like GRAS, and that is as safe. So those compounds that are in there, they kind of pre-approve those compounds on their own, and then they throw them all in there, and they don't have to go and test each one anymore because they throw them in this like category as if that's an ingredient on its own. But these are compounds, and you have no idea how they're interacting with each other at all either. They don't even test that. I mean, the actual purpose of the FDA is to protect us, protect our food, protect our products, the things that are going into our body or on our body. The EPA, what is that supposed to? It's a protection agency. CDC, protection agency. I don't feel very protected.
No.
These agencies that are meant to protect us have been weaponized against us. You talk about the
Absolutely.
USDA is meant to protect the small farmer. It's been weaponized against the small farmer. The USDA is there to make all food safe. It's been weaponized against us on behalf of corporations to use whatever chemical ingredient, no matter how toxic, to maximize profits.
That's right. And where does the FDA get its funding from again? I thought it was only 50% that came from big pharma. I've learned it's more than 50% that comes from big pharma. And where do those FDA officials end up after they rotate out of that government agency position?
Wall Street.
Here's a nice, comfortable board seat waiting for you, Sir
Yeah.
Right?
Come to Wall Street. We've got a nice, cushy seat for you.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And it's not just big pharma; it's big food as well. I mean, they're one and the same.
But we don't make food. I think that's the thing that's so real about America's system in relationship to it. None of these folks can actually afford to make real food because they're all being squashed by corporations like Smithfield and Tyson, who are just doing everything they can to maximize profit. The small farmers just absolutely hosed in the whole deal, and they can't make real food. So we don't have a choice of real food. There's no consumer sovereignty in the whole deal. You are literally up against whatever is put in the grocery store. And you used to think if you go around the outside of the grocery store, that's where you could eat healthy food, fruits, vegetables, meat counter, dairy. That's the stuff that's real food. And the internals of the grocery store are the places that make you sick. You can't even say that anymore. All the stuff that's on the outsides of the stores, the fruits, the vegetables, the meats, it's all been injected with this stuff that just is making us sicker. My kids struggle with weed allergies. I have never had that in my life. My wife doesn't have it. There's no reason why we would do that other than that's where we're at. You have to eat terrible food in the United States and your kids get sick. And that's the best we've got. That's impossible to justify.
Has anyone told this to the immigrants?
I don't know. They'll end up sick.
Yeah. Now my children, they're adults, but my kids both have cystic fibrosis, and that's a hereditary disease. But they also have collectively between them ADHD, diabetes, osteoporosis, POTS, which is postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, autoimmune thyroid disease, kidney stones, snow vision. This is a disorder called snow vision that my daughter has that she's been complaining about forever, and it's a thing. And she's got, hypersomnia. She doesn't hit REM, so she's got to take medication for that to function. My son deals with it as well. So there are all these syndromes. Another syndrome, I don't remember anyone ever telling me this one. And I hear several of the kids when they're chatting with each other when they were teenagers. My daughter says that once in a while she hears like this giant loud bang right when she's about to go to sleep, like a pile of books fell down. And then all her friends, I heard this conversation, they started saying, oh yeah, that happens to me, a few of them. So I looked it up. It's a thing. It's a syndrome. It's called exploding head syndrome. I kid you not. Right? So I'm saying all of this because that's what these people are having. They're having syndromes. And syndromes is not a disease. It's a collection of symptoms. So they're getting symptoms from things which are literally reactions. So they're reacting to something. And that's the way the doctors don't look at it. They don't look at it. They just collectively put it together into one ball and said, oh, that's a syndrome. That's a syndrome because these people have likely syndromes. Instead of taking those specifically apart and saying, well, what would be causing this? What would be causing this? What would be causing this? And they don't do that. And and now there's this big business on these syndromes because do you know how many specialists people who have syndromes have? My kids, urologist, psychologist, psychiatrist, endocrinologist, nephrologist, pulmonologist, gastroenterologist, allergist, all of them. I mean, within 1 year, multiple times. And it's mostly because cardiologist, mostly because of these symptoms, not of the actual big giant thing that they had hereditary that we couldn't prevent, all this other stuff, it's just, it's not just coming from the other thing, because I'm seeing it happen to all their friends. I mean, they're in their 20s, they're in their when they were in their teens, it was starting then. It's really, it's crazy.
And it's not like they're all too eager to do the long-term studies to determine the impact of the food that we eat or the drugs that we take or the vaccines that we're given, because that might reveal some need for them to take responsibility. What they would rather do is just let things go. And when those symptoms come up, like you're describing, Jacqueline, we'll develop a solution for that, just so happens to put money in our pockets, right? And we don't even know if it's really a solution or if it's just causing more problems down the road. And I'll tell you, I'll share this screen with you guys. I'm sure you've seen this, but this is a list of Bobby Kennedy's accomplishments over the years. And I hope most people know about this on some level, but you can see as an environmental lawyer, some of these accomplishments he's been part of over the years. He allowed himself to be arrested, you see in 2013 there, over the Keystone Pipeline. That was a key moment for him. He was the lead attorney in The Last Mountain, which was an award-winning film, and many others as well. DuPont, Puerto Rico, the waters in Puerto Rico, and then going back to the 1990s, we know about some of these other endeavors that he really just stood up as a hero on. And the list is even longer than this. And then, of course, there's the most recent representation he has for the victims of the Norfolk Southern spill, where, again, the agencies that were supposed to be protecting the people in the path of that railway were not. This was a situation where Norfolk Southern, and it doesn't matter if it's Democrat or Republican. It happened to be under Trump. They went to Trump and the Trump administration. They said we could save a lot of money if we could remove this safety measure. They were granted that removal. They were able to cut costs, save a few bucks. Lo and behold, that train was sparking for many miles before it went off the rails and that explosion occurred. The safety measure would have picked up that spark and come to a halt without any disaster occurring. So these are the kinds of things that we're prone to. Now, Bobby is representing the residents of that town, East Palestine, Ohio, and that's what he does. He comes to the defense of the otherwise defenseless. That's who this man is. That's his character, right? It's always been who he is. And I personally think, and we'll spend another episode talking about him specifically and his journey and his history and the family. I would love to spend an hour talking about that. But these are the things that, to me, highlight what a political problem this is. And if you're a team blue or you're team red, I'm here to tell you, it doesn't matter what team you're on. Both parties have been bought and paid for. They are both responsible for the problems that we're faced with, that we're describing this evening. The plundering of the average American into a pit of despair is occurring at the hands of both major political parties. That's why we need a revolution, a peaceful revolution, in the form of Bobby Kennedy, who comes in as an independent and will unite us in common ground solutions to these issues. And he himself says, I have a PhD. He's learned through these experiences that I showed on the screen before. He's developed a PhD in unraveling corporate capture. I can't think of anything else that we need more than that in this country right now. There are other things we need, and he's best at delivering those too, in my opinion. But that is the number one issue. And I think most voters who do their homework will say the same thing. It's the corporate capture and the price that the average American is paying for that corporate capture, whether it be through an injection of a drug, or the food that we eat in the local restaurant that we think is good for us and it's poisoning us instead, right? All of these things are occurring. Just the tap water that we drink, school lunch programs, we can go on and on. The list is very long. But the illusion is stock prices are still high.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So all is well.
Everything's fine, but nothing to see here.
Yeah.
Well said, Paul. I just wanted to echo that sentiment of the corporate capture being what we're up against and the root of the rot of the corruption that has taken us out, and how, yeah, you nailed it. What more do we need than somebody who's been fighting the fight against these agencies that have been captured and knows how to unravel it? And East Palestine, like you said, is such a great example of that. The red and the blue, they both had their part in that disaster. The Republicans rolling back, safety mandates, and then Biden, there was a strike concerning safety and having enough people on these trains, and they came down on the side of the Norfolk Southern and against the people, and we see the aftermath, and yeah, we've got to do a lot better, and we've got such a special opportunity to get somebody who's outside of this red and blue corporate captured system, who's really independent. And you mentioned a 70-76 moment. Yeah, we have a real chance to declare our independence. And if that was ever a hope for this country, and sometimes you think it can't be, it's right now with Mr. Kennedy, with what he's been doing in his career and with that last name.
What happened to those people in East Palestine happened to me. A little piece of me was part of that because I'm a fellow American. What happened to those people in the Nebraska farm who were forced to have glyphosate spread on their crops? That happened to me too because I'm a fellow American. We're all in this together. It's really important to understand that, because if you think it's not going to happen to you, there's an old quote from the Nazi regime, from Martin Niemöller, who said, first they came for this group, but I didn't do anything because they didn't come for me, right? And then there was this group they came for, and I didn't say anything because they didn't come for me, And then finally, they came for me, but there was nobody left to speak for me. And that's the path that we are on. We are making a beeline in that direction here. I hope that I'm conveying that strongly enough, and I'll leave you with a couple of other thoughts here, and then I want to hear from you guys. There's a video offered by Katie Hopkins on excess deaths in this country, and this has been talked about. Ed Dowd has talked about it. Many others have talked about it. It relates to that shortening of the average lifespan in this country. But people are dying of all kinds of things that we never thought possible before. Tricia Lindsay, whose name has been mentioned as a possible VP candidate, she, along with the Children's Health Defense Fund, sued the city of Philadelphia just a few months ago for allowing 11-year-olds, children as young as 11 years old, to get vaccinated without parental consent. Okay. That to me that's beyond overreach. That is medical tyranny, outright medical tyranny. And again, this is why we know that they will not stop unless we, the people, stop them.
Now, Kennedy has made a statement saying that he will significantly drop the chronic illness in children, the rate of the chronic illness in children, by the end of his first term. And he said, if he doesn't, don't reelect me.
Right.
Who says that? Who says that? The person that says that means it. They absolutely mean it. And when I had heard that, as a mom who has kids is in that group, that very large group. I mean, it just, someone could not say a better thing to me
Mhm.
as a promise.
I loved when he said that. Yes, I remember that. And the NIH, which these government agencies, they're we all get the strong sense that they're not looking out for the average person. They're looking out for the corporations. We didn't talk about lobbies and donations and the lack of term limits and all of that stuff, which all relates to this as well. But the NIH actually puts out some pretty heady stuff here about the healthcare system. And I'll just read this here. This was printed in 2017. So the American diet has changed dramatically since 1958, when Congress gave the U.S. Food and Drug, the FDA, authority to ensure the safety of chemicals in food. Since then, thousands of chemicals have entered the food system, yet their long-term chronic effects have been woefully understudied, their health risks inadequately assessed. The FDA has been sluggish in considering scientific knowledge about the impact of exposures, particularly at low levels and during susceptible developmental stages. The agency's failure to adequately account for the risks of perchlorate, a well-characterized endocrine-disrupting chemical, to vulnerable populations is representative of systemic problems plaguing the regulation of chemicals in food. Sound like something we're talking about? Today, we are faced with a regulatory system that, weakened by decades of limited resources, has fallen short of fully enforcing its mandates. The FDA's inability to effectively manage the safety of hundreds of chemicals is putting our children's health at risk. This is on the NIH website, 2017. Here we are 7 years later. No progress, same direction, which is the wrong direction. And people actually have the audacity, the arrogance to criticize Bobby Kennedy and his Children's Health Defense Fund. That, to me, reveals the power of these agencies and the pharmaceutical companies to dictate the narrative and capture people's minds who might otherwise think differently, but have been forced into a team concept. What do you guys think about that?
Well said, Paul. And what that reminds me of is this idea that, all of these scandals that we know of, all of this corruption in the agencies and in the corporations, and how many are there? Hundreds, thousands of instances. This is human nature, right? Each one of those, until it's widely known, could be described as a conspiracy. And somehow they control the narrative so strongly that they'll convince people that for you to suspect these known criminal entities of having something else up their sleeve, that you're crazy for thinking that, for even being suspicious or being cynical. What did Reagan say? Trust and verify. This is what we need to get back to.
Yeah, I love Kennedy's talking about his dad, and he always says, people in authority lie. So you just need to know that. And I think it's this natural, inherent distrust of government. They're not doing the job that we say that they need to. And frankly, with an economy this large, with corporations this big, with companies that have more income than most of the countries in the world, we need to have some way to address this. And I think he's the best guy to do it because he's been in the trenches doing this stuff.
So there's
Yeah.
there's a town in Maryland, right outside Washington, which I'm sure you've heard of, Bethesda, Maryland. Bethesda, Maryland is literally a town that has the NIH in there, the FDA, I believe, but the NIH is in there, and it is completely surrounded by medical organizations and lobbyists. and it's the whole entire town is just like this. It's them. They're all there. It's very incestuous.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
and who is washing each other's hands, and who is profiting together and sharing patents. And I don't see the incentive for something to be rejected. I see the incentive for something to be approved in the favor of someone else, and not for the consumer, and not for the patient.
Absolutely. Well, guys, I'll tell you what, there's so much more we could talk about here tonight. I am just hopeful that our message is getting out. My goal tonight, our goal, I think, altogether, is to highlight the magnitude of the problem, the fact that it is a political problem, and that there is a political solution, and that solution is Robert F. Kennedy Jr. There's to us, the path is clear. You know, we can talk about a lot more. I have a whole schematic where I'm talking about the 4 MICs. We're talking tonight about the medical industrial complex, which includes agriculture, but the medical industrial complex, which is one MIC. The second is the military industrial complex. The third is the monetary industrial complex. And the fourth is the media industrial complex. All 4 of those have gone off the rails.
Yeah.
And we are the ones paying the price for it. Our children are paying the price for it. So we'll explore all of those in upcoming episodes. And if you guys have any quick concluding thoughts, chime in.
No better time than now. It's time to get engaged, time to get involved, because it's a
That's
real
right.
thing.
We got a special opportunity to seize the moment. And yeah, Mr. Kennedy has been doing everything he can to rid our country of this toxicity in our water and our food. And yeah, with spring coming, it's a great time to remember that we can have that self-reliance. We can have food purity, food security, and local sovereignty when we invest in local agriculture done right, where we are. So let's remember that. Save the seeds and share them.
Earth Day is coming up.
Yeah, it is.
Is it April 22nd, I believe?
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Well, we'll all think of some way of contributing. I don't think the 2 major parties are talking about Earth Day and what we can do as citizens to engage in regenerative agriculture.
No.
And
no,
get a
they'll
sense
talk
of
about how to
community
use it
going.
as a political ploy to smash the other guy. That'll be about it.
There you go.
So I have a project that I've been working on actually with Jonny. It's called the Kennedy Victory Gardens, and it basically, we're trying to just encourage people to either dedicate their garden, cultivate their garden, or plant a garden. And in honor of Kennedy, and that is, if Jonny wants to tell us a little bit about the history of what the Victory Garden was originally.
Well, that's a great point. We started doing victory gardens at World War II. It was encouraged, and we started producing a lot of our own food locally. We made a huge impact in not being consumers. We were producers again, and so we very quickly we can return to being sovereign. And this really does provide everything we need. It can be food, medicine, building materials, fuel we can grow. And like you said, whether it's a garden in your backyard or just a tree, or however we can just invest in more life and more abundance locally, it's just, it really helps. And it's a message to others, and these echoes can resound. And all together we can be part of this great solution. So yeah, Kennedy Victory Gardens. How's that sound?
I want to thank all of you for staying on so long, especially Aaron. I was negligent in the chat viewing there, so.
Oh, you're fine. I'm good.
Okay, thank you. We're at an hour, so this was great discourse. Thank you so much, all of you.
Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Paul.
Okay.